Welcome to the Whose Body Is It podcast. I'm your host, Isabella Malvin. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a birth worker, life coach for sovereign women, hypnotist, and a former liberal feminist turned radical truth teller. On this podcast, I expose the forces at play attempting to control our minds and bodies, such as transgender ideology, porn, prostitution, and so much more. Together, we'll untangle patriarchal lies as you listen to jaw-dropping interviews with women from around the world. Warning, while listening to this podcast, you might find yourself triggered or perhaps notice where you've been biting your tongue on the issues that matter most to you. In my coaching, I help women stop getting triggered by every freaking thing, cultivate resilience, stop unwanted behaviors, and increase self-confidence. You can book your first session at whosebodyisit.com. And I want to just say that it's because of your endless support that I'm able to interview amazing women, get their stories out, and produce regular episodes for all of you. So, with that being said, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. And if you're just listening in, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and consider making a financial contribution via the link in the show notes. You can also visit my activist sticker shop. My pro-woman stickers have the power to intercept transhumanist programming. So be sure to take a photo of your stickers out in the wild and tag me on Instagram at Whose Body Is It. Without further ado, let's get into this week's story. In this episode, I'm joined by my friend Belle, a mother, a doula, musician, and hair and makeup artist. Belle lets us in on the path that led her both toward and away from gender-neutral parenting. We explore the strict sexual code of conduct within her Mormon upbringing and talk through her intimate introduction to the trans community. Belle shares how her own family's history of cosmetic surgeries played into her acceptance of and compassion for trans identified clients who had medicalized, alongside her honest conversations with a trans identified male friend whose quest for womanhood jeopardized his organ functions. We cover her well meaning intentions as a mother who they them'd her baby for 20 months, the reception of other adults to her parenting approach, the confusion she herself experienced while teaching her daughter about her body, and how something as overlooked as diet influenced her perspectives and ability to think critically about gender ideology. Belle also names the potential dangers children face if they are not taught that men and women are different, and emphasizes the role sex plays in how we determine our reality. Because we do go into nutrition a little bit in this episode, I have linked one of my favorite books in the show notes called Nourishing Traditions, the cookbook that challenges politically correct nutrition and diet dictocrats. Before we get into the beginning, I just want to mention briefly that you and I met at a women's circle in the fall of 2020. And it wasn't my women's circle. It was a mutual friend of ours' women's circle. And I noticed that you and another woman there were referring to their baby as they, them. And being turf that I was at that point, I remember feeling a real intensity in my body around it. And feeling wow, this woman just seems so cool. And I don't think we could ever be friends because she just they them her baby. And my whole vibe is about not that. Just totally making up a story that it was just never going to work, you know? And then I think I maybe saw you a couple times around, and then we ran into each other outside, and you came up to me and you said, I stopped they theming my baby. Almost a year and a half later. So So before we get into like how you stopped doing that and why you stopped doing that, take us back to like, maybe a little bit about how you grew up as a woman and maybe your relationship to womanhood, feminism. Like let's go back to like let's say your adolescent young adult womanhood time.
Okay, wow. And also, it's so funny to hear your perspective of that women's circle because I had no idea that, obviously I didn't know that that's how you felt. And I think that myself and the other woman you were mentioning are the two people in this town that I'm aware of that are like, that were hardcore they theming the babies at the time. So, yeah, that's an interesting reflection. I grew up LDS. I was Mormon growing up. So,
Wow.
yeah, and I
Wow.
was one of 5 girls in my family, and only now looking back do I really realize that I was pretty silenced. I was definitely encouraged to, like, be beautiful, have normal hair, um, and not be, like, too over the top or too anything so that I could attract a man and be a stay-at-home mom and be a good Mormon housewife and produce children, and that was definitely the narrative in my household. And it was also like my dad was the control person, very masculine, his way or no way at all. And pretty much because there were 6 children growing up, it was like everybody shut up, kind of because like my parents couldn't handle the noise and the chaos that comes with having 6 children. So we were all very hushed and silenced. And my my worth in the family structure that I grew up in was my beauty. I was always referred to as the beautiful one. I was never referred to as smart or talented or anything other than you really got the looks, so you should use that to catch a man type of vibe from the time for as long as I can remember. Yeah, when I was really young, when I was 5 years old, I was molested by a cousin of mine, and I completely suppressed that memory until I was in my 20s. But when that memory came back, a lot of things made sense in that I had a sexuality energy turned on in that moment. And then kind of from that moment forward, like my sexual value and worth was my worth in the world. Um, so when I turned 18 and I went out into the real world and moved to Los Angeles, I was so jaded and so hurt by all the sexual abuse that I had experienced that I just abused men, which I don't think it works that way. I mean, they didn't mind. I minded my whole life, but they were kind of just like, cool, a girl who doesn't care and she's never going to talk to me again. That's exactly what I want.
Mm.
So, so I went through a lot of just low self-worth, not feeling valued for anything other than my appearance, and not really being able to speak up for myself or set boundaries around pretty much anything. So leaving the LDS church really was a journey, and I think it's still ever unfolding. But I feel at this point like I'm finally coming home to the truths of who I am and what I believe in a way that I don't think I could have ever reached without becoming a mother and going through all the things that I had gone through.
Mhm, mhm. Wow, I had no idea you grew up Mormon. That's so interesting. Wow. So then you were living in LA. You were a musician, is that right?
I was there to pursue singing for sure, but I was doing hair and makeup a lot on movie
Okay.
sets.
And so in I don't know so much about LDS, but is like gayness condemned in LDS? Is there like active conversion therapy going on for like gay and lesbian youth? Like,
Yeah, it's definitely condemned, 100% against the word of God. And when I was growing up, it was like, don't even think about it. It's not a reality. And I think that there may have been like conversion therapy camps going on that were like super hush hush. It wasn't something that was at the forefront that people were fully aware of. But it was definitely like a huge, not a thing. Just pretend like you're okay and it doesn't
mm,
exist. And then at some point, the LDS church had to change their narrative a bit in order to like continue to fit in with the trajectory that society was on. And so then I don't even know if it was before or after I left the church, which was in 2009, 10 or that time frame. But at some point they were like, okay, we acknowledge that you could have same sex feelings, but and that's okay, but just don't act upon those feelings. And so at that point they kind of switched gears and they were like, you can be same sex attracted as a Mormon person in the church, but just don't act upon it and just still
Mhm.
marry a woman and you're all good. And I think that was also like after one of my biggest heartbreaks when I was 25. I had been living with a man, which was living in sin. It was like a year after I left the Mormon church. And after that really big heartbreak, I met a woman shortly after and I started to date her. And I felt like what my experience was madly in love with her. And so I don't know that I would ever really call myself gay, but at that time I was definitely referring to myself as like bisexual, pansexual, open, free, poly, like all of these terms
Mhm.
were really exciting to me, and it felt like I was doing something that maybe I hadn't been allowed to do in some
Mhm.
ways.
Mhm. And so then do you remember the first time you were introduced to the whole, like, trans ideology? I mean, obviously, you didn't think of it as ideology at that time, but, like, you met trans-identified men or women, like, doing makeup, or how did it kinda come into your sphere? Do you remember when you first started seeing it?
Totally. Yeah, so actually that partner of mine, I was living in Los Angeles and she refused to move there, and so through much conversation, we ended up landing on Austin and we moved here together. And I had just barely opened my own mini salon suite. And she and I went to this LGBTQIA, et cetera, gathering at a bar here in town. And they had a bunch of drawings for that community going on at their gatherings. And so I was like, oh, I do hair and makeup. I'll just offer something to this underserved community and I'll give away one free haircut, color, and makeup lesson to whoever draws that. So I started doing that monthly and I was giving away free services to members from that community every month. And so I would spend like 3 to 7 hours with a person who identified as trans once a month. And that's a lot of talking time. And I would
Mm.
be like, are you okay with me asking you questions? Because I just want to understand where you're at, where you're coming from, and stuff like that. So I really consider that time period in my life being a period of time where I was blasted completely open and I had basically no boundaries or discernment and was just kind of accepting anything that came my way as like, oh, that's cool, that's okay. And not that that's a wrong way to be, but for me, that was where the beginning of my acceptance of that idea started to happen. And then getting really close with these people that I was working with as friends, I felt like I really understood them and what they were going through to some degree. Um, and so that's really where it began. That was like 2015.
Yeah, was it mostly men who you were kind of giving these free makeup, hair sessions to, who were identifying as women?
Yeah, and I think that that was just mostly the group of people who were entering their name into that specific drawing because they were the people who wanted help with presenting as a woman the most. Like they had no idea
Mhm.
how to grow their hair out from a male haircut and how to do their makeup and all those things. So that was really what appealed to them. And there were quite a few women who just identified as gay or bi or anything like that. And a few of those people won the drawing as well. But I think that there were probably 7 or 8 men who were transitioning into becoming women
Mhm.
that I worked with ongoingly that initially won the drawing and then continue to come back for some long period of time as the process of growing their hair out and everything continued.
Ah, okay, so you kind of saw also a progression of them taking estrogen and, like, maybe having, like, breast implants and facial
Facial
feminization surgery?
desensitization, yeah, like
Wow.
the wild, like they would come back and have this giant scar. Like I had one client who I think flew to Italy for that facial refeminization or facial feminization surgery,
Mhm.
and then came back and, like, had tiny, tiny hair sprouts growing and wanted me to help hide the scars, and yeah, it was a lot to experience. I was just like, "Wow, I can't believe the lengths that people are willing to go to, like, feel okay," and, like, across the board, I there was only one client that I had that was like, "I feel great. I totally feel like I did the right thing, and, like, everything's great for me." Like, pretty much 6 of the 7 were like, "I still hate myself," or, "I still don't feel like I'm in the right body," even though now I've spent upwards of, like, $100,000 on making myself appear to be what I feel like I think I am on the inside.
Wow. How did you respond? Like, do you remember, like, what you said to when they said things like that?
I was just 100% trying to be like an accepting,
Mhm.
compassionate, understanding person for their experience. Like I had no idea what they really were feeling or going through. And so like I just felt like who am I, to say anything one way or the other about like how this is. But like flash forward to one of those clients that I had worked with. She's a really good friend of mine currently. Like we stay
Mhm.
in communication and it's been years since I've done her hair or anything like that. And I think she's spent like over $200,000 on all of the things to become a woman, and she's 6'5", and I mean, like like a big human, and
Mhm.
clearly, looks like a man and was born a man, and tells me all the time, like, I wish I could go back to being a man because even though I've gone through this whole process, I still don't get respect. I still don't get treated like a woman in this world. And now I'm like past the point of no return and it just is what it is. And so recently, actually, he reached out to me and was like, I'm having major issues in my body. Like, my liver's shutting down and all of these things are happening. And this was the first time in our relationship since 2015 that I was like, do you think it's because of the hormones that you're taking that are not meant to be in the body that you were born in? And he was like, no, I mean, it can't be that. I just recently got put on a hormone patch that's right above my liver. And I'm like, so is there any part of you that would be willing to stop taking the hormones so that your body can function how your body was born to function? And he was like, well, only God knows when we're going to leave the world and all this stuff. And I was just like,
Mm.
okay.
Wow. Wow. It's so interesting what you said, like that he was complaining about not being treated as a woman. Like even like that. Like that is the part of the issue is like this desire, this fetishization and romanticizing of what it is to be a woman when, we know that what it is to be a woman means to be the victim and the target of rape and violence, like in this world, right? So I always kind of harp on that and just that it's just so sad the disconnection, like it taking $200,000 to have it register that a 6'5" man will never pass as a woman.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, wow.
he still experienced rape, lots of really intense, brutal sexual treatment. Um, and on some level, I think that confirmed his
Mm,
feminization to him. I could never really know, but he had experienced a lot of that. And so,
mm,
anytime he would say to me, I'm a woman, honey, I would just be like, there's no amount of hormones that you can take or surgeries that you can undergo that will ever actually allow you to know what it really feels like to be a woman.
yeah,
Now, then I didn't feel that way. Now, that's how I feel.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. So you were like really, connected to this man through this process. I mean, so then when did you feel like things started to shift? I mean, in those conversations, I mean, you described seeing the scar on the head. I mean, can you remember having like a visceral reaction? Because what I find when women are kind of in and out of kind of sorting out where their comfort level is with it, the the visceral reality and the post-op and all that stuff is very hidden. Like, most people don't get to see that,
Mhm.
but if you're up close and personal seeing that, bandage with the scar, whatever it is, I mean, I imagine that that may have triggered something that most people don't get to see. We just get to see the before and after, nothing in between, right? Unless you have a family member or a close friend who is undergoing, electively all these cosmetic surgeries. But yeah, I was just wondering if there was any point where you're like, "Oof, but I'm not supposed to think that," kind of
Yeah.
feeling.
I mean, also growing up, my parents offered me um, surgery because I couldn't get rid of my love handles no matter how serious my eating disorders and workout disorders became. And so they were like, we want you to win this pageant. So we're going to get you liposuction. I was 15, but we're going to tell everyone that you had appendicitis. And then my mom has gone undergone a lot of things that were hush hush as well as far as surgeries are concerned. So I think that that probably primed and prepped me to just be like, oh, this is a part of something that you're doing that you're hiding, and like I'm on board because I had been
Mm,
hiding
mhm,
similar things in my own life and in my family's life for my whole life as well. So yeah, there was a part of me that was like, I don't understand this, and like I'm the person that you're trusting and coming to, and like I'll keep it on lock for you.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, because you could also see that they were clearly struggling emotionally and they were divulging all of the kind of the painful aspects that don't get publicized. Um so yeah, that totally makes sense. And that's
Yeah.
interesting that like there was some solidarity too with like having hid medical procedures in your life and in your family's kind of history, like yeah, feeling some kind of like empathy or solidarity in that way also is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
um
I fully understood the desire to want to be different and look different and undergo a medical procedure if that's what it took to achieve that. And so I think that that was probably the like point where I met them.
mhm, mhm, yeah. So then you have your baby, your beautiful baby, and deciding to they them your baby, was that something that you decided in pregnancy? Was it just kind of a matter of fact, like, I wouldn't wanna impose a woman man title on my child, so this is how it's gonna be? Yeah, how did you come to decide that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely my relationship with my female partner during that time period, and then all of the people who identified as trans during that time period really shifted my beliefs around gender, and that there was no such thing as gender, and that we weren't like there was no guarantee that we were the gender that our physical body was born as. And having those experiences like fairly regularly was like, okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. So it made sense to me at the time. And so yeah, during my pregnancy I really was like, I don't want to impose. I mean, I had heard these people telling me about their childhood pain and how they felt like they were a girl from the time they were 3, and like how their parents never accepted them and they had always experienced depression and all of this stuff going on. And I was like, I just don't want my child to ever feel like that. I want my child to know that they can be whoever they want to be with me. And so like my baby daddy, was kind of like, I don't feel the same way, but I'll honor what you want to do. And now he'll say he never wanted to they them our child, but he just didn't want to like come up against me about that, and so he just went along with it. So yeah, in pregnancy, that was when I made the decision that no matter what gender my child was born as, that they were just going to be a they them until they let me know what they wanted to be. And I they them Ziji for I think like 20 months. So like a long time. A lot of the formative first 3 years of her life. And there were multiple times where people were like, okay, but is it a girl or a boy? And I'm like, non-gendering, it's neither. And they're like, but is it a girl or a boy? And they would get like really frustrated with me and really, really want me to tell them. And I would even sometimes say, why are you so concerned with what sexual organs my baby has? That doesn't matter to you. That
Like
shouldn't.
trying to like you're implying that they're like somehow perverted.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I was like,
yeah,
a part of me did feel like it's perverted for you to care so much
yeah,
about whether my child has a penis or a vagina.
yeah, yeah. And so what were the okay, so you did have some pushback, it sounds like. What about from your family? How did was your family involved? Did how did they respond?
I had one sister, my older sister Jennifer. She was like, "I support you, Shelly Belly. Like whatever you want to do, I'll they them ZG with you." And so she and her husband and her kids, she taught her children who were like 4 and 2 or something like that at the time that ZG wasn't a girl or a boy. ZG was just they them, and they get to decide. And she really supported me all in. My mom and my stepdad and my parents never once referred to Zizi as they them, and always called her a she, and would buy her like really pink like super super girly stuff and crowns and all those things. And I was like frustrated and annoyed that they wouldn't honor what I was doing and just get Zizi like non-gendered, gender neutral colored items and what have you. um but they just were like, no, she's a girl, like we're not gonna do that. And pretty much every time I said they them in regards to ZG around my dad, he would just kind of like roll his eyes and be like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Your dad wasn't having it. He's like, Whatever."
none of my parents. And
Both your
so
parents. Yeah.
when I called my mom and was like, ZG's a girl, it's she, her from now on out, she like rejoiced. She was like, yay, oh my God, thank the Lord, my prayers have been answered. Like, yeah.
That's how I felt when we ran into each other outside. I was like, thank the goddess, my prayers have been answered. Like honestly, but it like it's not. I want to make it clear to like everyone listening. This is not just like the ego being like, "Yay, I won," or "Thank God." Like we are talking about intercepting what could very easily be and would likely be a lifelong medicalization for little girls and boys.
Yeah.
So, this is a huge feat to be able to like intercept your own thinking in this arena. I mean, because I was super on board as well with all of this for 3 years. I was using gender neutral language. I was only referring to my clients as birthing people. I didn't use the word woman or mother for 3 years in any marketing, any classes. I mean, only one to one would I say like mother. But I would always, I guess I was just like actively participating in female erasure. So I know what it's like to have been so entrenched and feel like, gosh, these poor oppressed people, what can I do to help them feel better? How can I meet them where they are? And then kind of like wake up from that. So I'm always curious, hence why I think why we're talking today about how the interception happens, how the kind of awakening starts to cause
Shift.
such a drastic shift. So, um, what do you think? I mean, if you could pinpoint a couple moments or times where it just started to feel like not good, what were those
Yeah.
moments?
Well, one of the things that ongoingly felt just confusing to myself was that I was teaching Zizi that she had a yoni and we both had a vulva, and I was teaching Zizi the, anatomically correct words for her body parts. And she would say, like when she started to speak, especially, she would be like, baby, pregnant, baby, mama. And because I'm a doula as well, I was yes, I was like constantly showing Zizi water birth, home birth videos. And so one of the first phrases that Zizi said was baby born water. baby born water. And
Mm.
and then she started to act out like a baby being born in the water from her. And
Mm.
so I was just like, whoa, like, how can I teach my child that she has a womb and a vulva and I would bleed and I would be like, one day you're going to bleed because we both have a uterus. And then I was just kind of like, what the heck am I doing? Like,
Mm.
how does this line up? But I think this stubborn part of myself that also wanted to just remain PC was like, but I'm doing it anyway. And the real turning point for me, I had these moments like I'm sharing with you about like the body anatomical stuff, but the real turning point for me was watching Housewives 2-part series that she has on her Instagram. And I think they're both like 30 to 32-minute long videos. It's like part one, my coming out story, part two, my coming out story, right? And I've been following her because I'm a huge advocate of free birth, home birth. I love how straightforward she is. And I'm just like, I'm about that life. And I kind of just like disregarded everything that she would say about anything regarding like gender and trans ideology. But I tuned into that video. And it was right around the time, ironically, when I started eating meat again. And I will just say, as a
Mm.
6-year vegan, my brain was completely messed up. Like my hormones were messed up. The things that I was attracted to, the things that I was willing to believe, the things that went down in my life for me, like I was so ungrounded. I was incapable of thinking clearly. And looking back, I think that was part of the reason why I accepted most of this so
Mm.
easily, because I was easily swayed and everything was just kind of like, sure, whatever. I was like floaty. And when I grounded down and started consuming animal products again, literally my entire life changed. I started being attracted to different people. I started to think more clearly, feel more grounded than I had ever felt in my life. And so at that time period, a lot of shifts happened for me. It felt like almost like I left the new age
Mm.
and started seeing things differently on almost every single aspect once my body was nourished properly and I was getting the nutrients that I needed to have a fully functioning brain. So at that time period, I found those videos of her coming out story. And she was like, I'm sure you've seen it, but she was like, I am coming out as a man and I've always hated my body. And so now I'm just going to have free surgery from the government. I also hated my body when I was a woman and I would have taken free breasts, but they don't offer free breasts to women who hate their bodies. They only offer free breasts to men who hate their bodies and want to become women. And just how she was like, how she went about communicating all of these truths completely hit me. It was like one bell after the other of like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my
Yeah.
God, oh my God. Like I sent that to my baby daddy that night and I was like, I'm done. I am not ever referring to Zizi as they them again. Zizi is a girl, we're she herring, we're done. And he was like, good, on board, let's do it, let's go. So I credit the shift to my change in diet and also to Bow Housewife. Yeah, Yolanda Norris Clark. Thanks, Yolanda Norris Clark. I owe it to you, like big time. So yeah, that was the major turning point, those two videos. And after that, I never looked back. It was so clear to me. And
Wow.
I was like, I have been blind. I felt like a veil was lifted from my eyes. I felt
Mm.
like I had been like my allowing my compassion and desire to understand a group of people to convince me that that was a truth, as opposed to just being compassionate to that group of people while still maintaining what I knew to be true, which is that there are men and women on this planet. And also, like for Zizi, I want Zizi to know, I want her to know, like, your body is the greatest gift that you have on this planet. And you were given this specific body for a reason. So no matter how you want to dress and no matter how you want to present and no matter how you feel during different moments and phases of your life, you have a vagina and
Mm.
breast and a uterus and you will bleed and you have a vulva and all of these things make you a woman.
Totally. Totally. It's so important to reinforce. And I love that you were so committed to teaching her about her anatomy. And then we're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
There's some conflict here. Oh, I love that. And I think this is a really familiar story for women. Like once they see it, it just crystallizes so quickly and there's no going back.
Mhm.
There's no going back. Like it is, and I say this time and time again, like as much as a trans that I believe, trans ideology is, it is also so fragile. It can be broken and opened if the person is willing to see it, like just a small opening, the whole thing crumbles. So I love that it was just like, you're like, I'm done, never again. Did you get pushback from friends when or was everyone just this a collective sigh of relief?
It seemed like a collective sigh of relief, except maybe from that one woman who you and I were in that circle with. And even she is supportive and
Mhm.
she's not like wronging me for that. But I could sense that when I let her know what I was doing, she was kind of like, oh, because she's still they theming her child. So, other than that, there was zero pushback. Everyone was kind of like, "Oh, good. I've been wondering if this is what you would come to or, like when this was going to happen basically."
Yeah. And I also think it's interesting that you had this like departure from veganism, and it makes so much sense. Like to be more connected to the land, to be grounded would bring you back to our most basic roots, which is our humanness and our sexual dimorphism. That all makes so much sense. And of course, like, yeah, I've worked with tons of vegans who describe kind of similar experiences of like literally going crazy, not getting the nutrients that they need. I mean, I felt like a smidgen of that as a vegetarian for 8 years. So I can only imagine how much worse it would feel uh, just without like eggs.
Yeah, and just like a moment on that because I feel like it's very important to communicate this to pregnant women. I was vegan during my pregnancy.
Mhm.
And I went into labor at 42 weeks and 3 days. I ended up giving birth at 42 weeks and 5 days. And I'm convinced I never had a great milk supply. I fought really hard to nurse CG for like the first 9 months of my nursing journey. I would power pump 10 minutes on and 10 minutes off, and I would get 1 ounce after 2 hours of power
Wow.
pumping. That was like clear, 1 ounce combined, not per breast. That was like clear, watery, and looked like basically like water that had a smidgen of like coconut water in it. It was literally like worse than skim milk, in my opinion. And when I started to drink raw cow's milk and raw cheese and animal products, my breast milk makeup completely shifted and now is like cream. It's completely different. I haven't pumped in so long. I don't know how much I would pump. But as far as the quality of my breast milk, it's 100% thicker, whiter, like all of that stuff. And so I hope to be pregnant again. I imagine that my hormonal cascade will work in a completely different way next time I'm pregnant. And I just want to be the voice that encourages vegan women, especially vegan women who are struggling with nursing or who are struggling with any aspect of like postpartum depression that feels insurmountable. And the list kind of goes on, that even if it's just a raw milk introduction, it makes a huge difference in our milk supply as mamas.
Totally. I second that completely. I'm all for the Weston A. Price, Sally Fallon protocols, 100%. It's transformed my health. Yeah, it's the way to go. 100% agree with you. Sorry to the vegans listening. I mean, I don't think there are many of you left here. I think, yeah, it's fair to say that I would say 99% of people who are not on board with trans ideology, who are like pro medical freedom, eat meat, eat animals, and are committed to a kind of a reclaiming and, you know, eating from and on the land. So, oh, I wanted to ask you, I think you told me we ran into each other out, that Ziji's name is a remind me the translation for her name.
I mean, and isn't this funny? Okay. So I thought that I was going to be having a boy my entire pregnancy because I didn't have any ultrasounds except for one, and I could not pick a boy's name. And then as soon as I saw that Zizi had a vulva, I was like, oh, it's Zizi Balmeru. And Zizi means goddess-like confidence. So here I am, non-gendering a child and giving her the name goddess-like confidence. I mean, like I've known the whole time. It was just like my highest self being like, you're going to figure this out. And she's a goddess and she's fully a woman, but there's going to be a time period of before that transition. So yeah, why?
Wow, that's epic. She was just right there all along. She's like, I'm ready. I'm like gonna burst out sometime. Like,
Yes. Exactly.
oh, I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for being willing to talk about this like very, very real phenomena that is going on right now. And I think I just wanted to like also highlight like I I don't blame parents, right? Like women, especially mothers, I believe always have the best of intentions for their children, right? And so
Uh,
doing this, like some people will say, well, how could they possibly do that? How stupid, how weird. No, the attempt, the intention is to free your daughter of harmful sexist stereotypes for her to be an agent on her own life. Like there were only positive intentions all along.
mhm.
So I just want to kind of like highlight that for people who maybe are friends with women who are still doing this, that like we know that they have the best of intentions, and you know, it's also takes a lot of vulnerability and courage to say like I was kind of duped. Like I was kind of tricked into doing this by the dominant culture, by the grooming. You know, like this again, I went through this as a doula. Like parents are being groomed. Adult people are being groomed to do this. Just as the children are being groomed. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
that is one other thing that I wanted to say. As Zizi started to get older and become more like touching her own body parts and touching my body parts, I really started to be presence to the fact that a man could come up to her with a penis and say, "Oh no, I'm a woman." And she would be like, "Okay, why?" Because I told her that anyone can be anything and it doesn't matter what body part they had. And that was like terrifying to me. Not, like not that every single person who is considering themselves a woman that has a penis is negative intentioned or would do anything to Zizi. That's not what I'm saying. But just the fact that I could create such a depth of confusion in my daughter that something like that could happen and she could potentially be encouraged to touch a man's penis as he's calling himself a woman, and she would be okay with that. And just like that whole realm, that whole can of worms was like, oh my God, like I need to be so extremely clear about all of this with her. And I think that maybe you posted this, that one of the most basic things that human beings have to determine what's going on around them is that's a man and that's a woman. That's like the first thing we figure out as humans. And it's so important. It's so important not to confuse children in being able to keep themselves safe in those ways and understand who they're being surrounded by and what's going on around them.
100%. 100%. Wow. Thank you for naming that. Yeah. So crucial for protecting kids.
Yeah.
Mm. Thank you so much, Belle. It was such a pleasure getting to know you a bit better and hearing more of like the full story. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I've been loving having this chat with you as well, and I can't wait to run into you again outside sometime soon.
Yay. I can't wait to. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support my work, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To stay in the loop for my latest coaching programs, hypnosis sessions, free resource guides, and more, follow me on Instagram at whosebodyisit and visit my website, whosebodyisit.com.